Yeah. Only pay for what you need with Liberty Mutual. Only pay for what you need, Liberty Mutual.
Hey there. Welcome aboard.
Or at least an acceptance from.
Welcome aboard. Good day, good morning, good evening, wherever you are.
My books and
welcome to Dreamy Dreamland with Sensei Al Bob. Hey there, AI. Oh, good puppy dog. Good puppy dog. Yes, AI. Good puppy dog. Yes. Who loves you, AI? I do. Not your corporate masters. Anyway, here it is, 1:12 Eastern Standard Time, and it's a beautiful day out there in the neighborhood. It's just a little freaking cold, right? And so I kind of, yeah, and you see, it's a beautiful day out there. Anyway, so I came in, make myself a bowl of soup, and say hi, and I just wanted to, I kind of, last year I got here in May, and the raccoons had like ripped the place apart. It took me all summer to just get it somewhat back together. And now I've been here since last May. And so I've gotten the place together, and I'm now deconstructing, taking things apart, looking for stuff. There's all kinds of things. I care about how I found my pick and my shovel and situation. I thought I was going to take everything apart, but I didn't. I just meditated and I saw what the problem was. So with that in mind, I went and did last night's thing. And at the end, I said, hey, I'm going to start meditating now. And then I'm going to lie down. And by midnight, I'll be asleep, but I will be consciously awake in my dream. And I'll be meditating. And any of you who want to, jump in on the astral plane, come and do it. And our brother from Ireland basically did, and he had these dreams of being in a coal mine and nuclear war and all of the above, which is a potential. Not going to happen. These are all potentials. Just like, this show's a thing is, 2020, year zero, 210 days, until let's get past the 1%'s lemon party, right? So anyway, here's our good friend David Icke. He's
every other way I can. That this world is controlled by a cult. It's a cult that has no borders. It operates in all the, at least major countries, and in fact, all the countries in the end, and particular in those countries that dictate the direction of the world. So the cult will be at the core of the system in China. It will be at the core of the system in America, etc., etc., etc. And so what have I said in this 30 years that this cult wants? I've said, and I've said it in the chats we've had before, it wants to create a beyond Orwellian global state in which a tiny few people dictate to everyone else. I've referred to this as the Hunger Games society. And you can picture the structure very clearly. Picture a pyramid. At the top of the pyramid, you've got a tiny few enormously wealthy people that actually are connected to this cult. We now have a name for them. We call them the 1%. At the bottom of this pyramid in the Hunger, that is dependent upon the 1%. in between the two, merciless police military state to impose the will of the 1% on the population and to prevent the population challenging the 1%. And this Hunger Games society is not.
Anyway, so you get the general idea. That's David Icke. So I was going through my stuff, and I came across this box here, right? And in the box, I found some really interesting stuff, and that's the beauty of this. And I would not have found it if the raccoons hadn't gotten into this section of my storage section and kind of pulled things apart. And this box fell on the floor. I didn't even forgot about this box, right? And so what did I find? I found this very interesting, envelope. And it had a little book that I made. Here's, a course study of the University of North Carolina where I went, and my GPA was for 3 semesters was 3.333. Not bad, Didn't even have to work that hard. So this was a tribe of Aborigines that I lived with in Australia in the Nook'n'Ba, in a place called Christmas Creek, about 300 miles south of Ayers Rock. Ayers Rock is it's a rock the size of Manhattan, a rock, not a mountain, but a rock that fell from the sky, boom, right there. Go Google Ayers Rock, right? Has its own, grab a whoop-de-doo thing, and it's one of these portals. And at the base of the rock, there are all these caves that have been, looks like cut in with a laser, meaning they're totally smooth. And they're, as old as that rock is. So it's like 3 million years old, right? And who put those caves there? And if you can see, these guys don't wear shoes, Their feet are like shoes, right? They're as flat as you can imagine them. And they all of them, nobody's wearing shoes, if you really, you can see their toes, right? These guys all are, and nobody in that tribe. And this is the elder grandma, and these are the 3 oldest guys. Now, this tribe in 1971, amounted to about 900 people, right? And they were out there in the Nook'n'Ba. And look, see, nobody really cares about this neck of the woods, right? Until they found uridium, gold, cobalt, and a few other rare earth elements. And the corporations owned by their 1%, in Australia, Rupert Murdoch owned every radio, TV, communication he owned, right? The transportation, Reginald Anson owned every airline, every bus, every way of trucks, you name it, rental cars, Reginald Anson, and there were 5 guys, and there was this, like Illuminati and do strange things, and their buildings were from the Gilded Age, and they experienced the mud flood in Australia. That's where in 1977, I learned about the mud flood from this old archaeologist, right? And he took me to a building in Melbourne and showed me the line of where the flood had hit that building, right? So I found this book, and there's picture after picture, of me living with these folks. Right. And this woman, she was in her, the mineral folk went out there and shot everyone in the head. killed like 900 people and just left them right there on the ground. Didn't bury them, didn't take them away because it was out in the middle of nowhere. No one cared, right? And the only people who survived were these 9. There were 9 of them that survived, and because they were out picking berries, right? And these people survive on what's around, right? And so, David Icke's talking about that 1% and how the rest of the Hunger Gang, the rest of us depend on, and they're going to send us a check, right? I live on my Social Security check. And so, so, and that 30-year-old lady had a baby, right? And we would find everything we needed in the junk pile that was about 10 miles from this campsite. And that's where the white people just threw their garbage. And this was they call them a perambulator. So this lady had that baby, right? And, she looks like she's 100 years old, but she's really 30. She was a child when everyone got shot. And they was taken away and sent to an Aboriginal school, just like the Native American schools. Here's our kitchen, And this is out in the middle of nowhere, around a few trees with some tarps, And there is my sensei. He was the oldest guy. He and I would walk about him. And there was another one, his buddy, who was, a very short guy. And here's the mom. And one of the guys who was, once she became a mom, one of the government people came by and kind of, he was a doctor and he was making sure we were all healthy, but they were way healthier than Canarias, the doc. And, he wanted to control them. He was the government guy. And so here's the Polaroid. Polaroid gave me a bunch of Polaroid SX70 cameras, and I gave them to those guys, and they took pictures of everything they wanted to take pictures of. So they let me take pictures of them, right? When I was sent here by the government people said, oh, these Aborigines are like children. They'll never let you in. They'll never let you study. They'll never let you take pictures, etc. And there I am, right? There I am, right there. And there's the guys. And one sister, right? Here's the little guy. He's a guy, I was walking across a gigantic valley. He says, can you get up in those mountains the next 20 minutes? And I said, what are you, is this a test? And he goes, and we were talking about it. And again, here is one of the government ladies who came, because we started sending all kinds of data about these people, photos of all their sacred sites, their ceremonies, everything. And she and that other guy and another person was like, saying, oh, this can't be true. And, how did you, because I had a Bolax 16 millimeter film camera, and I would send them back films, right? And I did, them finding all of the corroborates, all the sacred sites, all their artifacts were in red plastic Samsonite suitcase. I don't know where they got them all, but about 12 of these sites, and they would, we'd be walking out. I mean, there is no real landmarks, It's like, and so this poor woman, she went out there, and she, I would cover myself up, right? And she got there, and she got the worst sunburn, and she got skin cancer a year that there were issues. And so when I went out there, they didn't give me a car. I took a bus, right? And Don and I took us about 3 months because we kept, when you get off the bus to go get something to eat in some little town, If you weren't there when the bus driver wanted to leave, he would just take your luggage out of the bus and drive away. And the next bus wasn't like tomorrow; it was like 2 weeks later. So we got stuck in Broome, and we got stuck in Perth, not Perth, where cultured pearls were started, and we also got stuck in Alice Springs, right? So here was my campsite, and we had no camping gear, so I kind of made a tent out of the grass on that, and I dug it into the ground, so it was, semi cool, Let's see, here's Mama, and that baby was born, without a dad, was no insemination. When we got there, she wasn't pregnant, and then she got pregnant, and she had the baby within 4 months. We were there about a year, and within 4 months she had the baby, and then the baby was like, walking around within 3 months, So here is the government people's car, and this was just the people who were from the doctor and that lady, right? And so here's this baby. Look how big that baby is. That baby is only 6 months old in that picture, right? And he could walk around, He was Jesus, And of course, he was killed at 18 because he was in Melbourne organizing the Aborigines, and he was, because his mother could read and write, she taught him how to read and write, and he was really smart. He went off to a private school, not an Aboriginal school, and they wanted to, the elite wanted to make him an Aboriginal politician in their case, and he basically. So these are dingo dogs, right? Right, and these are spirit guides, and I had 2 dingo dogs, and here are the 2 elders, and this is Jimmy Bantry, right? And he traveled 1,000 miles to come see us. There's only 9 people there, and me and Donna, and because I was sending all these films and photographs back to, hey there, Eden, do you remember their names? Well, this guy, Jimmy Bantry, yeah. And the mama was Alice. And so, here is the elder who is small, and he's taking me around, and he's got no shoes, and I got these army boots. And this is when I was probably in some of the best shape I've been in. I was about 180 there. All I ate was, grubs and plants and nothing from the supermarket because, we were 900 miles to the closest anything, right? And so I had to eat. And I was always covering myself. I had a big umbrella. I was always wearing the shirts over my head. And they could fix anything. The white people who had their farms, 50, 60 miles away, they would come and these guys would fix their cars with virtually no tools, right? And the farmer guys would give us stuff like that. Say they gave us a whole load of watermelons, thinking black people really like watermelons. Well, everyone likes watermelons, not just black people. So that was, our campsites would be, out there in the middle of nowhere where there was a little stream. So there'd be some trees, and these were areas that would flood out big time when they would have floods. So you had to be able to break camp. And these guys knew when it was coming a day or so. No satellite, no radio, no nothing. And everything, like this table, we got that out of the garbage pit. Everything that we needed that we couldn't make there, we would walk. We were sometimes we were close to the garbage pit, a mile or so, never more than 6 miles. Unless the whole tribe went walkabout. But then we would leave our campsite there and we would go someplace else just for fun. So there's Donna. There's my sweet Donna. Donna Ann. Irish, Celtic, just a wizard of everything. Brilliant. There she is with her Leica, you know. And this is this is the oldest woman elder, right? And there were only 9 of them. They were all old, except for that lady who had a baby, right? So this lady remembered World War One, and this is 1977, 78. I mean, she doesn't look, she's got to be in her 90s. She could outwalk any of us. And I have to hand it to Don. We were there, almost a year, and we were eating grubs and tubers and insects and she never complained. And like I said, our campsite, what we slept in. Oh, here I am. So there's my dingo. There's my dingo dog. There's me, right? And that's kind of, see, I always wore something on my head. I always had a cape. I was, Lawrence of Arabia. And here we are. And we are in a circle meditating, right? And there's the woman who had the baby. The baby is just like weeks old. And look what he's got around his head, a halo. He was glowing white light all the time. And there's my dingo. He's trying to drag me into another reality because we're like meditating there, right? Where is that? Where we were camping. So this is one of the government guys, right? Look how uncomfortable he is, right? He had his own like little camper, and he had his own food, and he and he was sitting next to Mama and the baby, and he was like, because people kept saying, "Oh, he looks like you." He didn't like that. Oh. So Don, I have to hand it to Don. She was a real, in the 8 years we were together, Donna was always an amazing trooper, Once I helped her open up to her powers of insight, because she was truly psychic, She just had to learn how to, understand what she was seeing. There she is. Look how happy she is. Look how happy that girl is. This is when she was some of the happiest she ever was, right? Nothing bothered her. She was just, and this woman took it upon her. I mean, this woman was actually the chief, the most powerful shaman of the crew. Those guys, not so much. They just been around long. They knew, they knew the drill. But she was in charge, and she took Donna under her wing. And Donna was like, oh, So there I am with the shirt over my whole head, right? Because the insects were unfriggin' believable. So if you ate like, Twinkies and drank Coke, you had a zillion flies up your nose, in your eyes, going after you big time, right? And that was me before I got acclimated. There I am again. And like I said, these guys, they weren't as powerful as the women. There were 3 women and 6 guys. And here's Mama again. And she liked me. She and I would go picking herbs and berries and tubers, right? She showed me all the things how to eat. The guys, just gave me, got me to eat things. I was like Mikey in the cereal commercial, right? And I would, oh, wow, this is great. What is it? And they wouldn't tell me. And she was the only person who would go and stay, would be really aware. The other guys were aware of everything, but like their whole life was being aware. Right? So here's our campsite, the kitchen. There's our little pots and stuff. And here's where the homeboys came from Perth, the experts on the Aborigines. They couldn't believe. They wanted to know how I manipulated the film, And it was like, I'm out here. I got no dark room, no anything. All I had was a changing bag take the film out of the movie camera and put it in metal cans and then tape it up and then put it in metal envelopes. And whenever that doctor guy, he would send it off to their main office, once a month or every so often. And so there's Dawn, and she's like really upset with the Perth guys because they are like calling the Aborigines children and, not worth anything. And Don is about to kill him. And I'm like saying, Don, calm down. Just, let these morons go. And she is really ready to, and when she would let people have it, they knew they got it, She was very upset that day. And I had to take her off, and we went down about a mile away from the morons. And we, meaning you looked out like, this is a good picture. Oh, this is a good picture. So, you look out there and it just looks like, scrubby nothing. But out around these trees, there were these rivers, and you didn't see them this way because they kind of, they were just open to the sun this much. But if you went down where you could get down there, they were really wide, and the land, the rock would come because the water would dig it out like the Grand Canyon, but little canyons. And I took her down there, and where there was a really nice place where they had the beer in the water, and so we went down there and we lied in the wet sand and drank a bunch of beer and. No, this was our campsite. Donna she lived in that. Most women could not deal with that, it's so messy, Donna, whatever we were doing, she was up for and we lived in this. We did not have a tent. We did not, and that's my sweetie. And she still is sweetie. She's married to a guy in Vermont who's a writer. And he's it was truly amazing. He looks just like me, but about 10, 15 years younger. So, and he's a tenured professor. And they love to gamble, right? And people said, oh, they're so lazy. All they do is gamble. Well, it was quite interesting because they get a check, right? And so they would get a check. They go to the Aboriginal store, they cash, and then they gamble, right? And some guys would lose all their money and the other guy would win all the money. And people said, oh, can you do that? And because the guy who, here's some boys looking at Polaroids they took of each other, right? And so the guys from Perth, the experts, said, oh, they'll never let you take pictures. Well, I had these, SX70 Xerox things were like magic. And I gave, and Polaroid gave me a bunch, right? And boxes of film. And so I gave one to each person, showed them how to load the film, how to, take the picture. And they went and took pictures, right? And some of their images were the most amazing. Polaroid went nuts. So here's this lady's back, right? She's just come from Perth. And I don't know if you can see it, but she has on her back about 300 flies. All of this darkness around were flies. And they were like drinking her sugar sweat. Because she was drinking, she brought her own case of soda. It was pretty friggin' amazing. She wouldn't eat any of their food, and she had all these cakes and cookies, and that's all she had. And these guys got their check and stayed in town and got a little too drunk and got arrested, right? And the police chief of that county or whatever you want to call it, which is, like the size of Pennsylvania, basically brought him back. He was a nice enough guy. He didn't really, but they were like pretty, drunk at this time. And white people were freaked out by it. right? And here is our campsite when a flood. This is like about a week later, and this is all water here, right? This was all flooded out, and this was when the old guy and I were out there in the valley. If we can get up the top of that mountain in the next 20 minutes, we might survive. And the rest of the crew, they went, because they always camped where there was a higher, something above 30, 40 feet. Because that's, the floods were never anything more than 15, 20. At the height, the 68 flood was about 30 feet. So they had a place they could run to quickly to get away from the water. So, and they knew it was coming before it was even there. So they're pretty good at it. And here is another campsite we made when we moved out of the flood zone. And I went into the garbage pit and found old tarps and this really interesting kind of aluminized cardboard stuff, which was quite amazing. In that when I did that, when you went in there, that it was like at least 20 degrees cooler in the hot sunny day. And we're out on top of a hill where there's no trees whatsoever, and that's just kind of rock. And we're up above where the flood was. And in a couple of weeks, it kind of, and here's a boar that they had penned in, and we're getting ready to slice him up. They caught him, and they were waiting to slice him up. So here is, the white guy from the expert on the Aborigines, right? And his, the other lady who's the expert on the Aborigines. And the doctor over here, he was always in the background. He never wanted, he was like, really, what am I doing with these people, right? And so when the expert showed up, the guy put on his cowboy boots, and because they love being cowboys, right? Okay. And so here is old campsite that they moved to after the flood. It had just receded. Stuff was washed up all around the stuff, and they were, getting ready to be their winter campsite. Because in the wintertime, which is when the people who have ranches in the 600-mile radius of them will come and get these guys to be their cowboys, because they're the best cowboys in that region, right? And so they rustle up the cows, they rustle up the sheep, and then they get paid a little bit of cash, but mostly in animals, which they slaughter themselves. And so this was their winter hacienda, and they had pens where they would put the animals and slaughter them over a period of time. And we were around for all of that. So this was their like, they actually had kind of buildings, but built from garbage, just stuff, right? And I actually liked, because this was kind of on highlands, right? So there were no trees, so it's awful hot, right? So that's why I built that little shed, out of this mylar stuff, right? And there's me. I'm wearing a West Ham shirt. My buddies in Melbourne were West Ham United folk, and Jimmy Bowntree's brother was this guy, and he was always drunk, right? And Jimmy was trying to really represent the Aboriginal people. He was like the governmental representative of the Aboriginal people, right? And he was doing his best to try to do that. Now, this guy was, a white Aboriginal guy, right, along with the doc. And Doc was kind of comfy with him, right? And this was a bar out in near a station, right? And we went there, and this is where those guys got drunk. This is where they would get their check every 3 months. And they would have this check. There were no banks, they had no bank accounts, and they would sign the check over to the guy who had the bar, and they, it was a store. They had all kinds of stuff. You get flour and bacon and hardtack and tools, and that's what this was. This was that camp. And so when the Aborigines were there and stayed the night, they would lock them in these pens, which normally were used for animals. And so there we are. We spent 3 or 4 days there, right? And what we were waiting for was they were loving getting drunk all the time, and but they had gotten a lot of supplies, and they couldn't carry them, the 100 and something miles. So they were waiting for one of the farmer guys who hired them to drive them back to their spot, right? And there I am, right, with Doc and me, and that's kind of how I looked all the time. I always had something over me, keeping the insects and the sun off of my bod. And this was on top of that mountain that we ran up to get away from the big flood, the elder and I. And again, this is out there at the, place where they had the store, and the store owner lived in this, and he had a power line actually going to that. They call them stations, right? Now this was pretty cool. This is a white dotted line. Ayers Rock, right? Big rock, size of Manhattan. It's about 4,200 feet from the ground to the top. Has its own gravity, and you can't climb it with European like pylons and ropes, and because it's a rock. You nail something in there, it breaks off, right? So the white people for the first 80 years couldn't get on top, and this one rancher was on his horse, and he saw a bunch of Aborigines on top of Ayers Rock. And so he got off his horse, tied the horse down, and he got his binoculars, and he was watching what they were doing. And when they came down, he saw them walk down the side of Ayers Rock. And he rode over, and they came down. He said, "Hey guys, we've been wondering how to get up there." And they said, "Well, there's a path. There's no." So he says, "Wait right here." And he went back and he got himself a big thing of whitewash paint, right? And he went up the path with the Aborigines painting this path. And so if you don't walk, put your feet on these and this, like if you're walking up here and you step over there, the gravitational field may just throw you right off the top of the mountain. And on top of it, they have the white line because it looks flat. It's as big as Manhattan. You think you can walk in it. No, whee, right? So that's what that is, right? And there used to be a motel right at the base where tourists would come and they would take you on a tour. And they kept painting over the, dotted line. So when they took and you could walk up it, but they drilled holes in the mountain and put pipes in them and put chain just so you could hold on to it and feel somewhat safe, right? Let's see. There's Ayers Rock, right? That gives you a good sense. That's a good 10 miles from Ayers, and it's a rock, right? See, it's a rock. And we're about 10 miles from it. And here's the flood. It carried that car. It says 60. If you could see it, it says 68 flood, and this is out in the middle of nowhere. But there are these like little canyons everywhere. Wherever you see trees, there's water in the ground, right? Okay. This is a poster that Jimmy had. Our chance of going to Melbourne University are 1 in a million. Why? Aboriginal Week July 7th to 11th. And that was made illegal, So I went to Melbourne. I was living in Melbourne. And Jimmy, we were organized this, and this is when the Queen was showing up, and they were about to have the election between the Labour and Liberal Party, and the polls showed the Labour Party was going to win for the first time ever, and take out get rid of the corporations, get rid of, Pine Gap, and because you think Area 51 out there in Nevada is really. The place Pine Gap is more more underground stuff, more aliens, more Nazis, more everything. And we were going to do a big rally in Melbourne, in the square. And it's a square where you're supposed to be able to speak your mind, And we went there, and they had military police with loaded guns and just was shooting people, right, with rubber bullets and live ammunition. And I was, going with Jimmy, and Jimmy went early, and we were going to bring Helen Caldecott and a few other well-known folks to speak, and I went and got them from the airport, and when we got there, there was nobody there, but there was blood on the ground and broken signs and everything. And here's, if uranium was found under your Vatican, would Queensland Mines send the Pope to Palm Island? Land rights now. Yeah. And that was one of the first, after those people were shot in this late 60s, early 70s, this guy tried to organize land rights for Aborigines, and he ended up with lead poisoning, from bullets. So that was something I found. I forgot I even had this, right? And if the raccoons hadn't kind of dismembered everything, and then the other thing was, this is a very good book, the 7 Books of Moses, introduction by Paul Tice. And this is quite, this is a book that a friend of mine, who was part of Kabbalah's little class I was studying under our rabbi, this other guy who we both were, visitors. We weren't Hasidim or Lubavitcher. And I wasn't even Jewish. He was. And he wrote this book, right? And let's see. The book 3, post office, blah, blah, blah. Introduction. It is hard to determine when these magical books were first written, but we do know that they were translated from the ancient Hebrew, right? The Hebrew. The 6th book of Moses is also known as Moses' magical spirit art and is composed of a number of secret seals used, in Eastern religions. They would be called, I forgot what they'd be called. But anyway, so here is, this is quite the interesting book, right? It has everything in the ancient Hebrew. And this is one of the, this guy and 3 other people, we were a study group, right? And and again, I was just the guy who knew how to make everyone play nice with each other, right? These guys, they were like in it, deep. They were like taken over by it. Me, I was interested in it. I wanted to learn to read Hebrew. I wanted to learn, the mathematics of Kabbalah, and because of Mr. Morales, I was looking at everything in the secret spheres and, in geometry. Everything to me was geometry. So this is quite, and so this book, I was wondering where this book went to, and bingo, there it was, along with the Aborigine guys, right? And the other thing I found was this runic book, which is a pretty good runic book. Not as good as Mr. Bloom, but still a pretty good one. And I had misplaced all my runic books, and now I'm finding everything, and I'm not. The major thing is I am not. And the other thing I found were a whole bunch of new socks. I've been wearing the same pair of socks for the last 8 weeks. And the other thing I found was the Magic 8-Ball, right? And this one hasn't been worn out. This is like a super brand new. It's about 6 years old, but never been used, right? So the whole secret to the Magic 8-Ball is never to shake it, because they put a few bubbles in there. If you shake it, it erases the letters on the Magic 8-Ball, right? But so what you need to do is spin it, right, like that. Come on. My question was, does the 8-Ball lie? Yeah, that's what I was thinking. And it says, don't count on it. So that's like, I love the 8-Ball, because is it saying don't count on the 8-Ball, or that it's always telling the truth? Like, it's always giving you that mixed metaphor. And now it says, it sounds good. Like when I said, it's a mixed metaphor. It sounds good. So anybody got any questions? Eden, you got a question to ask the Magic 8-Ball? What is it about? Rest of, let's see. The Hebrew have the 3 mothers, spirit, air, fire. Whereas I believe the air starts knowledge, water, mother, moon, earth, father, son. Yep. The 4th, such as angels that hold everything. Well, they don't hold it. They are just the emissaries, right? So, okay, I'm going to take your question. How did Halo Jesus die? Not very nice. Basically, he was leading a march, and a bunch of drunken white guys grabbed a hold of him and tied him to a car and dragged him over a gravel road. And he was basically, he couldn't, they tied him in such a way that his face and the front of his body was dragged across, and for miles and miles and miles. So his face was taken off, his chest was taken off, his genitals were taken off. He bled out. And then they left him out there to be eaten by the animals. So that's how baby Jesus died. And it was a big march, and there were cops there, and these guys grabbed him, and the cops protected the white baby Jesus. And he was about 18, 19 years old, and he had been at university. He was eloquent. He wrote, and he never got published. And that happened in the 80s, or 90s, Back to Eden. Oh, let's see. How grand is it that God gave those men the choice? God gave those men the choice to do otherwise. Yes, I mean, that's free will. And that's really, we are right standing on the edge of free will. And I keep talking about, I have been talking for at least almost a year about, hey, we're at the window of opportunity. And the other side of the opportunity is we're going to be obliterated. And that's an opportunity too, And I'm blessed to be out here in the middle of nowhere with a bunch of stuff, with leaves and trees growing over them. I have to like pull it apart, and the stuff is, it's still dry and not rotted out. I mean, I found that book of those pictures in a place that things next to it were rotted out. But that book of photos, that's 1979, 89, 99, 2009, 40 years old. Those pictures are 40 years old. So we are in interesting times. And I started off with David Icke, explaining, that 1%, and on the title of, the description, I'm saying, let's get over the 1%'s lemon party. I'm going to use that up the kazoo. Everything is worth using, right? When you put it in the right context, right? So we've been talking 51 minutes. And Eden, how you doing, buddy? So tell us more about, listen, what I want you to do, Eden, I'm going to get myself a bowl of soup because I'm hungry and I can smell the soup I made. And I want to make sure it didn't burn. And if you can describe what you were talking about this morning, about your dream, about the mines and nuclear war and all of the above, right? So I'm going to put you down here, and I'm going upstairs to get myself a bowl of soup, and I'll be right back, okay? I'm going to put it here and see if he comes. Okay, and I'm going to put the 8-ball in front. A little altar. I'll be right back. Be right back. So tell them, chat there, if you will, and I'll be right back. Oh, so what has Eden been saying? Hmm. Hmm. So, well, Eden was having dreams of coal mines, and which are more or less domes, deep underground military bases, and nuclear war, explosions. And when nuclear war happens, it's like um, whenever they launch their missiles, like we have SLMBs, right? Sea-launched missiles, ballistic missiles. And each of those have MIRVs, multiple integral targeted reentry vehicles. So one missile, instead of having one bomb on it, can have anywhere from 5 to 20 that at a certain point released, and they go, when they're coming in from, low Earth orbit, 100 miles above, you let these guys, and they go in different directions. They can, one missile can lay out, 5 to 20 cities in a country, just one missile. And our SLMBs, our sea-launched ballistic missile submarines, each carry somewhere between 20 and 80 of these missiles. And we have, at any one time, somewhere between 10 and 20 of these missile submarines, nuclear-powered, just hanging out. They go to a certain place and stay there quiet and wait. They drill launching these missiles, and they wait for the order to come. And they are so rotely trained that when they're doing their drills, they don't know whether it's a real one or just a training thing. And they only know after the drill, and it says, oh, this was just a training, right? So they're so programmed, they'll launch those missiles. They won't give it a second thought, because most times they'll think it's not Armageddon, it's just another test. And the same is with the guys in the land-based ICBMs. They go through these drills and tests, all the time. So my dream, so I went into state and was dreaming, this was pretty good. I'm a good soup maker. That's the German in me. The Germans, they're not like the French or the Italians, not really known for their cuisine, but they're amazing bakers and great soup and stew makers, and good with vegetables. So I have that German, my German side is Steinbeck. And John Steinbeck was my second cousin. And between the age of 8 and 12, he used to come in because and it was interesting because there was the grown-ups and then the kids' table. And him and Thomas Merton, who's another person who would come visit, because he fell in love with my mom, and that's what made him she said, "Oh, Tommy, I can't date you. You're like Episcopalian. You got to be Catholic." So he went to change his religion into Catholicism, and he fell in love with that side of creation of Jesus Christ. So because he was a poet, he was a writer, and so he used to come, and I used to sit with them at the kids' table, because my father and his friends and my mother, and they were all about their stuff. And these guys weren't about stuff. They were about life. And there I was, between 10 and 12, a few years. And I tell them stories about, my friends, the polyamorous crew of grammar school and middle school that I talked about when Mr. Seven wanted me to talk about lesbian deathbed. And I basically told the stories of my friends. And I told those guys those stories, and they liked those. This is good soup. So I made a big pot of this the other day. And so I can just take parts of it, put it in a smaller pot, add water, get it boiling, turn it down real low, wait about 40 minutes, and it's perfect. And this is cabbage, onion, tomato. And I took some of the homegirl made what is known as spaghetti, baked spaghetti. You basically have a tall pan that you can put in the oven, and you put water, tomato sauce, and spaghetti in the pan, and put aluminum over it, and turn it to 350, leave it there for 40 minutes. And if you have meat, you kind of brown it up first and then add it to that mix and cook it some more, and then put whatever cheese you have on top, and you take the aluminum off, and you until the cheese is melted and starting to bubble, and to turn crispy on top, and then you put the aluminum back on and turn the thing down and let it cook for another 40 minutes. And bingo, it's ready. It's kind of like hillbilly lasagna. And so she made a bunch of that. And that is best a few days later. And it's been in the fridge fermenting. And so I cut about a third of it and threw it in with my stew, the meat. And I had a couple of, I buy chicken when it's on sale. And it's actually, some foods are pretty cheap right now because they know they better get rid of it before it dies because they're not getting any more. So I bought 20 pounds, 2 bags, 20 pounds each of chicken legs, the whole thing, and breast, right? Each bag was 20 pounds, and each bag was $4.99 on sale. So I bought one of each, and put them in the freeze. And so when I had the big pot and I had everything, all the vegetables kind of worked down, I added the chicken and let it stew in the vegetables for an hour or two. And then I threw in the third of the baked spaghetti and then let it all cook up and had some then. And that was, so I've been having a little bit of it every day now for the last 3 days. And I throw in, when I want to be creative, again, they had a lot of frozen vegetables on sale. So I bought cut beans and corn and Brussels sprouts, and they were 50 cents a big bag. So I bought about $10 worth, right? And so I stuffed the whole freezer here with the chicken and the frozen thing. So every time I do this, I throw in a bag of vegetables. So there's like a fresh vegetable amongst the stew, right? And they also had big bags of potatoes that you take a thumb and you kind of go across the skin. After it's soft enough that you can take the skin and the skin is green, then they pick the potatoes way early, right? And so you can keep those potatoes there for at least a month before they're ready, right? And they don't rot, and they don't, if you keep them in a dark, cool spot. So I have had last month, since February, chicken, pretty good stews. And I probably spent all of under $20 for all of this. So I bought enough stuff to make fresh, really great stews for the next 4 months for $20. And so every time I go shopping, I spend about $15, $22. That's about it. Right? And I only buy things, if I see it on sale, like that chicken, I bought 2 bags. And I bought a bunch of frozen veggies, and it was I had $20. And those 2 bags of chicken and the frozen veggies, I spent $18, with tax, And that's enough really good food to make really good stews for that was about 2 weeks ago. So I haven't been shopping since, right? And I also bought, with another $10 I had, sour cream. And they have these sour creams that are like spicy sour cream, onion sour cream, spinach sour cream. And they were almost, normally they're about $3.99, a thing. And they were almost at their date. So it was 5 of these things for $4. So it was, each one of those was under $1. And that's how I roll. That's how I live. I have really good food, and Johnny Boy is going, oh, tell me where you are. I will send you some food. I don't need to tell him where I am or have anybody send me any food, because as long as you're a smart shopper, even during these pandemic times. But they get on the satellite the farmers channel, and I'm seeing farmers really having a hard time. And this is what happened during the Dust Bowl. They produced, because all of Europe was destroyed by World War I. And so they farmed their land into dust. And then, the depression just didn't happen like that. It was like slowly happening. And the same with us. just because the stock market was going nuts didn't mean that our economy was good. A lot of people were struggling. So now a lot of people who were just getting by and pretending, like Mr. Seven Figure, they're starting to see how the other 60 million people in America were suffering. So everyone's kind of getting the experience that they need to have empathy. And the fact that we're still here, the fact that we haven't blown ourselves, back in 1970, when I was at the UN, in part, being pruned by the CFR and a bunch of people who wanted to be a poster boy for whatever they wanted me to be. And they became an with me. Instead of them getting upset, they said, okay, that's fine. And I've been invited a number of times to join up. And each time I said, oh, I don't know. Well, right about now, I think if those guys came back and asked me to sign on, I would. Because right about now, I have experienced enough, gotten to a point where I don't really care. And all I'm doing is serving creation. So if I signed on, I would say, okay, that's fine. I could enjoy the life you're offering, but you have to realize I'm not going to be serving the all-seeing eye. I'm going to be service to love's co-creation. Now, I understand that you guys are part of that. And my job is to enlighten you to the fact that you're part of that. And that it's been a miracle. I mean, this book right here, where is it? Well, this book right here is a really good book on talking about, the Hebrew magic that's, keeping this abreast, right? And again, this is just this guy's appreciation of what we were studying as a group, right? And again, he was quite, amazing, Rabbi Shalab, right? He was Jewish and he did become a rabbi. Me, not so much, I was just along for entertainment's sake, right? And, pretty much all the things I've been involved with, I was the guy who was, we like Al. He's fun. He's, he brings us kind of insights that, because we're so focused on this one little point of view, he always gives us, I never thought of that. And so that is my value in any motif, right? Okay, so we're on about an hour and 14 minutes. And it's going on 2:25. And, guys, you need to put it in like large, direct to explain. Difficult to explain, yeah. Let's see. It's heart-wrenching because you suddenly have no time to do anything. You just want to just suddenly, yes, I mean, that's nuclear war. You walk a do, and then this flash goes off. First you're blind, and then your skin catches fire, and then the shockwave hits you, and you're obliterated into dust. Yes, that scene from Judgment Day when she falls asleep drunk at the table, and she's etching something on the table, and she wakes up in a dream, and she's out. There are kids playing in a schoolyard on swings and stuff, and mommies and daddies there, and everyone's so happy. And she's on the other side of the fence and she's like, and then all of a sudden the flash of light, and then everyone just bursts into flame, and she, for a few seconds before she bursts in, she's watching everything, and for those few seconds she's seeing what Eden's talking about, and then she gets obliterated, right? And that's the one good thing about nuclear war, is that if you're at ground zero, you are toast, and pretty quickly you're not going to suffer. Whereas people who are like 10, 15, 20 miles away, if they were looking in that direction, they're blind, can't see anything. And they've been irradiated. They've been like cooked like a microwave oven, with X-rays and beta radiation and gamma radiation. And so, a day later, they start vomiting their guts out, and then they feel really bad. And then the next 4 to 20 days, it is a hellish death. Much better to be incinerated immediately, right? But just like that 1% knew this was coming, soon as things, started to creep out in October, the intelligence community, everybody on the intelligence community knew this and told their rich friends, who basically shorted all their stock and made a windfall profit when the stock market collapsed, right? Then, through their buddies in the Senate and Congress, got $21 trillion in less than 2 weeks, and, they almost got it given to them without any recourse, meaning it was just going to be given to them without even saying who got the money or what they spent it on. And then a few people in Congress said, wait a minute, we already saw this happen in 2008. No. So they got the barest minimum of oversight of this, right? You should make an apple crumble. Yeah, I love that. But I'm not I'm a guest, and I can make a stew and not make a real mess. But when I bake, it's like a mess. And that's why I like, when it gets warmer, and I'm down at the Deep Green, about 1.5 miles from here, I can bake to my little heart's content. Because I have a Dutch oven, and I bake in that, and it really works quite nicely. You're making a raspberry crumble. I wish I was there. Maybe nuclear war is the least, yes, nuclear war is the least of our worries. Because we're here for a reason. And the fact that there were many times, hundreds of times, when they pushed the button and it didn't work, right? The Swedes, they have their own little space, and they launch missiles off of platforms out there in the sea. And they tell all the countries, they send them notifications, hey, we're going to do this. And they do it through the European space whoopee. And they send up their own little satellites on these little rockets, and they do soundings and all kinds of stuff, right? Anyway, so they were doing one of these, and they sent everyone a notification. And in Russia, this was after the Iron Curtain fell, and their military bureaucracy kind of fell apart. And so their radar picked these missiles coming out of, the sea, like, the Americans are, a sneak attack, they're launching their submarine-based missiles, and, it was only one, right? But their computers were so defunct and funky, they gave we're better launch our stuff. Anyway, so they woke up, Yeltsin, the drunk, and he was so drunk, he had to punch the numbers in, 21 numbers, right? He had to do it. Somebody else couldn't do it. He had, and it had to do it within so many seconds of each other. So the guy couldn't just take his finger and do it. And they tried and tried and tried, and they couldn't put in the code. And then half an hour went by, and they realized, well, if that, you know, if they had launched it from a submarine right there, we should be dead. And they went back and looked at the data and saw, well, it was only one missile, not a whole, bunch of them. And so, but because Yeltsin was drunker than a skunk and he couldn't punch in those codes, and that was just one. There were hundreds of times when the launch thing came in, it was a misnomer. And same with ours, our Minuteman threes were notorious, and the Titans, they blew up in the silos. And so somebody's been making sure that we haven't incinerated ourselves. We're like monkeys with matches and gasoline. So ooh-ba-doo-boo-boo. Stories of the Credo Muta. Where are my glasses so I can? Here we go. Even in shorthand, when it's lowercase, I need two glasses. Yes, just make an apple crumble. Okay, let's say maybe nuclear war is the least resort for humanity. If everyone decides to stand up to Luciferian state, go do some research and read the stories of the Credo Muta. Exactly. That great reggae song, get up, stand up for your rights. I mean, we definitely have to do that. And we're like all in our house, woo. So we got to stand up, right? So, and that's why I keep going on about the alternative aesthetic, right? Because in the 70s and 80s and 90s, when things were pretty rough, I, was involved in many, many, many cultural aesthetic movements, right? Kind of like the Bauhaus, but like that's what, when we put it together, we were thinking of this as, the Bauhaus of the 80s. That's the black fellow David Icke spoke to. Oh, yes. Credo Muto. Yes. He was the African shaman. Yep, exactly. I mean, David is amazing. I mean, he's been doing this stuff since 91. He came out and everyone called him nuts and took everything. Oh, he's saying he's Jesus. Took everything that David Icke. So no wonder David's, a little hard case about this. But everything he's saying is righteous. And he actually tries to describe, he's had a number of books that were going on about, hey, don't just get upset about this, do something about it. Let's talk about, loving yourself and forgiving yourself and opening your heart. And, that's elements of the alternative aesthetic. So David Icke is definitely, no matter what people say about him, you have to give it to him for being at it for 30, 40 years. Now, I've been at it for 30, 40 years. I mean, I started looking at this stuff in 1963 when Jack got whacked in Texas, in Dallas. My mom and I, were sitting out in the North 40 on this big rock. It was a beautiful day, and she brought out cookies and cocoa, and me and my dog were sitting there, and then we went in for lunch, and by that time it was about 1, and that's when the bulletin came over, Jack Kennedy's been shot in Texas, and we were watching, dialing for dollars, and then it broke breaking news. The first time it was breaking news, and they had Walter Cronkite, and then they went to a Folgers commercial where it was a clock with a metronome, the tick tick, and it was like hypnotizing everyone. And my mom and I were like. And we watched that for the next 2.5 hours until, Walter cried. And that's when my mom, was sitting on the, she was on her 4th pack of cigarettes. And and drinking her third blender of Manhattans, and I just went outside with my dog, and it was still a beautiful day. And then my dad came, and the whole family watched TV for the next 4 days, and then Oswald was shot by Ruby live on TV, and they got the bastard. They, it was like a gestalt, it was like a release. They did it it was all choreographed. And, 10 years later, I was working for a guy at Metro Media, Channel 5 in New York, a friend of my father's, and that was my summer job. And this guy was head of engineering. And he was, smart guy, Mr. Microwave, and he worked for CBS, and he was their first microwave guy. And he was the guy who was in Dallas, and instead of shooting it on to the major markets and put live, and he saw behind the curtain, so that what it was, meaning that he was being told, he thought he was going to go to the Cow Palace and set up his cameras and shoot Kennedy's speech, but no, they had him set up his cameras in the base, in the parking lot of the police, right where they brought Oswald, and he set up his cameras so he could get a 3-shot of that, and he got a script 4 hours before the police said that they were moving Oswald, and they had, because it was black and white, they had the 3 cameras in the direction. There was a standpipe in each direction, and they painted it pink, green, and blue, or 3 major colors, but would look, just like gray. And when he got the script, about 3 hours, it was, Oswald, walk through doors, start, your stopwatch, at 30 seconds, camera pink, camera blue, camera yellow, and it switched, bing, 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 and caught everything. Him walking down, switched to Ruby coming down and breaking through the crowd, switched to the 2, Oswald and the 2 policemen on either side, and these guys are holding him out like, don't shoot us, here he is. And then cut to Ruby coming out with the gun, and you could have never caught any of that unless it was scripted. And it was done by a stopwatch. And that guy, from that point on, was like, until he got a really well-paying job for the rest of his life, like 7 figures, starting in the 1960s. And, he lived a nice life, but he started drinking vodka pretty quickly after that, because he didn't say anything about it. So, yes, it's all right in front of us, right? It's not like anything hidden, anything that we can't imagine what it, it's right, right in front of us. And exactly, and David Icke has been talking about it for 30 years, right? Talking about the 1%, talking about the reptiles, talking about, all of this. And it's right there, and talk to any holy person, and there are a lot of them around. They talk to you about their experiences, and they've been knowing this is coming down. The Bible talks about it. This, ancient Hebrew stuff talks about it. Ooh. These people talked about it, and they couldn't even read, and they knew exactly, like, I had this big umbrella, and I was always covered, and they said, you're a smart boy. And I said, yeah, it's like way too, it's like, because I'm sensitive, Donna, she went around and got a tan, but me, I was like, not going to get baked. And I'm Italian. She's Irish. I have a little Irish in me too. But anyway, one of that old lady and the old guy, we were sitting around the fire. Everybody was asleep, and they're telling stories. And they were telling me stories when they were young that they were where they were in that neck of the woods near Ayers Rock, and they were out there in the middle of nowhere, and it was no moon at all, and it was a starry night, and they see this from where they were, but they saw it because everything was dark. They sort of, the rocket exhaust, and it went up into outer space, up into the troposphere where the ozone layer is, and they detonated a hydrogen bomb. And they said the whole desert lit up like day, right? And that's when the spirit guides told them that things had changed, that these morons had broken a seal of humanity's quest, right? And all bets were off, right? And so, and that wasn't it. They did it a number of times, and that is what got rid of the ozone, not hairspray, not CFCs, right? So, and that's why we got the above ground missile test, so, the English and the Americans did that in the Wallomistan, 3 or 4 of those, and then Russia did one, the largest hydrogen bomb detonation on the planet ever, and because they like things like that. And we did one a few hours later, and we set again, we broke another seal by sending out a scalar harmonic throughout not just our solar system, but it affected the sun, and the sun is a time and space displacement device, and we did something to it, put a hole in it, and so entities could come through from other dimensions through that hole. Now, they were coming through other things that we were doing, like in Brookhaven and Montauk and other places, so CERN. And so it wasn't that doorway that it's still open. And we learned how to go into other dimensions and other galaxies through the sun. And there are people who kind of keep their telescopes focused on the sun, and they see ships going into the sun, right? See it tonight. Yep, okay. So it's an hour 33, and so when it hits an hour 33 minutes 33 seconds, I'm going to say goodbye myself and go get some more soup. So we talked enough this afternoon. I'll see you tonight sometime between 5 and 7. Right now it's 2:44, so I'm going to go back outside. Hopefully it's warmed up a tad. So where is that? So goodbye. I love you. To everybody. AI, who's a good puppy? You're a good puppy.